Every filmmaker has a voice, and every artist has something to say. Yes, sometimes that voice may be quiet or unoriginal, and that statement may be simplistic or just boring, but again, every artist and every filmmaker is still always saying something with their art and saying it in a way that only he or she can, and Spike Lee is certainly no exception. In fact, he probably has one of the strongest voices in Hollywood and has made some of the most pointed and direct statements that I can think of with his films in the last 2 or 3 decades. And with his newest film, BlacKkKlansman, he continues that track record. From the way that he directed the performances and placed his camera, he was constantly seeking to, again, make a very pointed and direct statement to us, his audience, about racism, hatred, and the evil still found in our country. Which, for me, though it probably shouldn't have been given Lee's previous films, was actually a bit of surprise. From the trailers anyways, BlacKkKlansman looked to be primarily a much lighter buddy cop film, which would focus on the relationship between a black officer and a white officer who must learn to set aside their differences and work together. And indeed, that narrative thread and that lighter tone was found in this film to some degree, and did work quite well for me. Both John David Washington and Adam Driver had excellent chemistry together and turned in equally brilliant performances. Their often dry comedic banter regularly making me smile. Just as clever and engaging as those two actors was the structure of the narrative, which forced Washington's Roy Stahlberg to simultaneously investigate a black power group as well as the Ku Klux Klan. Lee also used that plot thread to construct a number of rather taut situations where either Adam Driver or John David Washington found themselves just barely able to maintain their covers in increasingly dangerous situations. But again, all of those more comedic and cinematically entertaining elements of plot and character were just a sliver of what Lee wanted to do with this film and only a portion of what he wanted to communicate. In a very impressive way, he also endeavored to have both the characters and us, the audience, along with them, slowly progress past the comedy and entertainment to get to the much more dramatic core of this story. And so when the characters were forced to question what they were doing and why, and really how much they actually agreed or disagreed with the ideologies of the groups that they were infiltrating, so were we, the audience, encouraged to do the same. But it wasn't actually that the narrative's tone made some sort of slow progression from the start of the film to the end. There were actually a number of sequences that possessed both the comedic and entertaining, as well as the dramatic. There was one scene in particular where an elderly black man was talking about some of the horrifying atrocities that he witnessed in his life, and that scene felt so real and so sincere and consequently so moving and powerful. But at the same time, that scene was intercut with Topher Grace's David Duke giving a speech to his Klans members, initiating them into the Ku Klux Klan. And that scene felt so over the top and so heightened and consequently just plain ludicrous. And though I did have some sort of fleeting thought that Spike Lee had actually failed in that sequence to create something tonally cohesive, unable to draw something more realistic out of that Klan meeting, I then realized that that was the point. Lee had very intentionally crafted it that way as to communicate the truth. That being, those men in white hoods are in reality ludicrous, and their actions and ideology should feel foreign and other. And it really is such a tragedy that the real-life individuals that believe the nonsense that David Duke was spouting in that scene aren't actually that much different to what seemed to be over the top and heightened in this film. So even while I could go on and point out certain narrative or structural flaws found in this film, whether the slower second act or the more underdeveloped side characters, I would rather just conclude things by saying this film moved me. Specifically, the way that Lee chose to end this film was such a gut punch and just really did leave me shaking my head in sadness. There is still such evil and hate found in our country and all around the world. And yes, this is just a film, but nonetheless, it's a film that had something very important to say. And even though it wasn't without its flaws, Spike Lee's voice was still able to shout out a message and shout it out clear to us, his audience. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 4 out of 5 and a heart. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And I am curious, what are your top 3 Spike Lee joints? Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.